Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. The topics discussed in this podcast will reflect my opinions and are not in any way to be regarded as medical advice. Harvard med student eats 720 eggs in 30 days. That's a lot of eggs. And eggs in the 70s in particular and 80s, and like a lot of mythology in medicine, it takes a while to die down, really did get a bad rap. And it has come out, and we've known probably for the best part of 20 years that they are not a problem in terms of cholesterol, they're not a problem in terms of health. 720 in 30 days is probably quite a lot. I think it works out to effectively one every hour. But this particular med student, his name's Nick Norwitz, and he has a YouTube page, and we'll put the link in the description below, is doing what's called an N=1 experiment or study. And these are interesting, and we'll get to those in a moment. But the interesting finding from Nick's study, and it is only on him, so it may or may not apply to everybody else, and that's the point, is that his cholesterol went down and his LDL, low-density lipoprotein, sometimes referred to as bad, I don't like the term, it's not as simple as that, but it's the one that's used, bad cholesterol also went down. How does that happen? Look, I recommend you listen to Nick's video, and we'll put that in the description. But essentially, it just makes a mockery of the idea that eating eggs is bad for our cholesterol. Double-blinded, randomised controlled trials are regarded as the gold standard in medicine, and they certainly have a role. They are useful. What is interesting is that they were originally devised not to test the efficacy or whether a medication works or not. They were originally designed after thalidomide to test the safety of medications, and then somehow got morphed into being efficacy trials. So you trial a medication against placebo. If it works better than placebo in a statistically significant number of people, and that is a p less than 0.05, so there's less than a 5% chance that the medication actually worked rather than it being a chance effect. You could argue that for every 20 trials that get done, one of them actually it won't have been the medication, but we might not go there today. But essentially, these are regarded as the gold standard, and the powers that be in big public health and otherwise will tut any other form of study that gets done. Well, there are different ways of looking at the world. Now, the weakness with double-blinded placebo-controlled trials is twofold. Number one, they often have select populations. So, for example, if they're going to do a trial on a new blood pressure medication, people with conditions such as kidney disease or diabetes will be excluded from the trial. And there's probably good reasons for that. But what it does mean is that the population that the medication is trialled on may not be the population that takes it. And also, that a medication may work, or any medical intervention, may work in a statistically significant number of people, doesn't mean it works in everybody, and it doesn't. And we know that some people get response in the placebo group, and we also know that some people in the treatment group don't get any response. We do not have a blood pressure medication that works for everybody. We do not have an antidepressant that works for everybody. Nothing works for everybody in all circumstances. And we also know that some people get side effects, even if it does work, and then it's not suitable for them. Some people have allergies. Penicillin is a useful medication. If you're allergic to it, it's going to do you far more harm than good. So the idea of this N=1 study is the beginnings of personalised medicine, which is an interesting concept that I was first exposed to 20 years ago, and it hasn't advanced all that far. The issue with RCTs, and again, we'll put the article in the description, although unfortunately it may be paywalled. These studies, the randomised control trials, find averages over large groups of people. They've helped identify better treatments. They often overlook important individual differences. For example, someone who's stressed or eats poorly may respond very differently to a treatment than someone who exercises daily. And it can cut in either direction. This one-size-fits-all model underscores the limitations, this is very true, of traditional research in addressing the complexity of individual health. People often find themselves prescribed treatments proven effective in large populations that do not suit their unique biology. And that's a really important point. And that's something that you never hear about from big public health because it doesn't suit them to say that. So they're not actually being honest. No medical intervention is going to work for everybody in all circumstances. And to be fair in this situation, Nick has actually made the point that his cholesterol has gone down after eating 24 eggs every day for 30 days doesn't mean that everybody's will. But what it does suggest is that some people's will. And to be honest, I could not eat that, and I don't think he's advocating that anybody does it, and there's no suggestion that is actually the number needed. But, it could be that a couple of eggs a day does help your cholesterol. There's only one way to find out, and that's to do an experiment on yourself if you are that way inclined. Same thing applies often with diet. People will find different food groups or different eating patterns work better for them than for others. Casey Means, who's written Good Energy, made the very valid point in a podcast. I think she was interviewed by Megan Kelly. And if you don't follow her podcast, I strongly suggest you do. She's brilliant. Where she said, the diet wars are a distraction because it's about nutrition that suits you as the individual and getting back to what the body needs. And the body needs good proteins, the amino acids, the essential the good proteins, amino acids, I said the essential fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, water, obviously, probably doesn't need so much by way of sugar. So individualised medicine, my suspicion, my hope, is that somewhere in the next 50 to 100 years, we will be able to say to an individual, this is the most useful treatment for you. And that will be a combination of genetic testing. There are already some genetic tests that can be done to check suitability for different antidepressants and other psychiatric medications. That's helpful. Not a given, but it's helpful. And as we go further, this will be able to be identified, and we can then individualise treatment. So, like, we've got 50 different blood pressure medications. You know what? Your biology, your genetics, some other perhaps biomarkers inform us that this particular treatment is most likely to be suited to you. It's never going to be 100%. Maybe in 300 years it will be. Maybe sooner. At some point it will be. But for now, this concept of finding out what works for you, and that includes adjusting diet, that includes adjusting your exercise patterns, can include adjusting your sleep regime, these concepts of the N=1 trial, rather than being dismissed, are actually quite useful. They're not the total picture. We need the randomised control trials. We need what is called real-world studies, where it's done on people out in the suburbs and the cities, not in a randomised control form, but studying people for periods of time who are on a particular treatment to see how they go. We need real-world data, and we do need information about what works for the individual. And if we're not talking specifically about medications, often the best way to find out what works for you is to actually find out, through a bit of trial and error, what works for you. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share, and consider subscribing. Tell your friends. If there are topics you'd like to see covered, be in touch through the chat or email info@drjoe.net.au. We'll be uploading new content each Monday, and soon we'll be putting these videos out on X. You can follow me there at Dr. Joe's DIY Health.